20s. Fresher behind this weather front as it turns drier for Northern Ireland, northwest Scotland. Though often quite cloudy here with some sunny spells. Through into the evening time, this weather front pushes a little bit further south and eastwards, eventually arriving across southeast England into the early hours. Behind it, clear spells and scattered showers as we head towards Monday morning. Some of the showers could be heavy at times. Overnight temperatures generally single figures behind that weather front across the north and the west, holding up around 12 degrees in London. But it means a grey start Monday morning in the southeast with some outbreaks of rain. This pushes away. Bright skies following, some sunny spells, but the risk of showers following on from the north. Some of these could be heavy at times. The odd rumble of thunder is possible, and temperatures fresher for all. Showers on Tuesday too, but then it should be drier for Wednesday. Temperatures rising a little.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, fellow travellers, blithe spirits. Welcome along to Neil Oliver Live on GB News TV and on your radio. Tonight, for donkey's years we've been told Earth is overpopulated, but is it really? We'll have both sides of the story. We'll be finding out why an ancient Roman wall discovered beneath the City of London has been granted the highest level of heritage protection, and why I believe we're being led up the garden path by the powers that be yet again and always. All of that and more coming up, but first an update on latest news from Tatiana Sanchez.
Neil, thank you very much and good evening. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. A call has been made for a special summit to bring an end to the toxic rail dispute. RMT union boss Mick Lynch has written to the government calling for a meeting with an independent chair, if necessary, to end what he's described as chaos on the railways. It comes as passengers face another day of disruption, with workers again joining the picket lines. More strikes are set to be held on the 31st of May and the 3rd of June. That's the day of the FA Cup final at Wembley. The union's General Secretary is blaming the government for failing to negotiate.
This government is determined to keep this dispute going because they've got issues in healthcare and with the nurses and the doctors, with the teachers, and they're trying to clamp down on working people's pay so that they can transfer that wealth to the rich people of this society, where dividends and profits are up, the stock exchange is up, the economy is growing, but they want to do that on the basis of low pay, and we're not prepared to accept that.
Protesters have been demonstrating against the proposed ULEZ expansion plan. Motorists were beeping their horns in support of the protesters in Orpington. The Mayor's proposal to expand the ultra-low emission zone could potentially reach the Kent border by August. Some outer London boroughs, along with Surrey County Council, launched legal action in February over the proposed extension. Protesters say it'll hurt them financially.
I have my own gardening business. I've just had to fork out nearly £30,000 for a new van that is ULEZ compliant. In a cost of living crisis, adding extra cash bills onto people's already inflated outgoings is totally unnecessary, and it's totally brutal, in all honesty.
The Labour leader says he's ready for a dirty and nasty campaign ahead of next year's general election. Sir Keir Starmer used a speech at the Progressive Britain conference to outline his vision for the party, which involves changing the entire culture. He also admitted more work needs to be done to reconnect with working people.
The Labour Party will only restore hope in the country if we once again become the natural vehicle for working people, an agent for their hopes and aspirations, a party of the common good. Now, some people think that all we're doing is distancing ourselves from the previous regime. Well, we are, but that misses the point. This is about taking our party back to where we belong.
A nurse from Devon has won a £200,000 prize for her work in improving diabetes care. Margaret Shepherd from Exeter was chosen from over 50,000 medical colleagues across the globe. The 60-year-old won the Astor Guardians Global Nursing Award for raising awareness of the condition. She's set up a network of genetic diabetes nurses and has become the leading nurse for monogenic diabetes in the UK. President Zelenskyy has met with the Pope to discuss a peace mission to end the war with Russia. It's his first trip to Italy since Moscow invaded Ukraine in February last year. The Ukrainian president has also held talks with Italian government officials, including Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and the Italian President Sergio Mattarella. Now, momentum is building ahead of tonight's final of the Eurovision Song Contest in Liverpool. The UK's entry, May Miller, who will perform I Wrote a Song, says she's ready to get the show on the road. She's one of 26 acts to appear before an estimated global audience of 160 million viewers. The UK agreed to host the contest on behalf of last year's winner, Ukraine, and these fans are very excited for tonight.
It feels like a home abroad. That's why it's like really we're so proud to be here, so proud that people in UK they're supporting us in everything, and we are so grateful about this.
Well, listen, I'm so proud to be from this city, and I just hope we're doing Ukraine proud, and I just hope everyone's going to have a ball today.
Instead I wrote a song.
Well, the Eurovision host Graham Norton says the calibre of performers has excelled over the years.
I personally think we're going through a kind of golden age of Eurovision. I really think the shows for the last few years have been great, really good songs. And I think that time of, there was always a kind of a nostalgic thing and a kitschy thing and a campy thing. And there's a little bit of that left, but actually now it's just a bunch of great pop songs.
Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser says the priority of the contest is to celebrate Ukraine.
What we've tried to ensure that here in Liverpool there's a huge support for Ukraine, a collaboration with Ukraine, an opportunity to showcase Ukraine. And I've just been with the Culture Minister for Ukraine, and he's overwhelmed by the support that he's seeing here in Liverpool.
Now, a 99-year-old woman's lifelong dream to have knives thrown at her has come true. Don't worry, it was all part of an act, and the former circus worker couldn't wait to step back into the ring, having blades hurled at her by a professional. Annie Duckblock, who turns 100 in August, she asked to be part of the performance as a birthday treat. She said she really enjoyed the experience and was ready for the next one. And finally, special behind-the-scenes footage has been released from the King's coronation. The Prince and Princess of Wales have published a 5-minute video on their official YouTube channel, including footage of them in their coronation robes before being taken to Westminster Abbey. Royal fans also have the chance to see Prince Louis and Princess Charlotte preparing to leave home at Kensington Palace on the morning of the service. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Neil.
When did we get used to being led up the garden path by government and parliament and to turning a blind eye to it? Are we just so battered and bruised, so deliberately demoralised by the last 3.5 years that for most people the effort of clinging on to daily life is taking every ounce of strength? It's all around us now, blatant and shameless. Are we so exhausted we've started taking it for granted that members of Parliament will routinely say one thing and then do another? Where are the howls of outrage at what seems to me like incessant lying? History tells us politicians have always lied. The difference now is that it doesn't seem to matter whether we notice or not. Last week, Kemi Badenoch announced another U-turn. U-turns are routine now, obviously, and this one was about going back on a promise to scrap thousands of European Union laws. The reality of the U-turn came camouflaged in all sorts of weasel words, but underneath the smokescreen, the truth was undeniable. While campaigning to be Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak talked loudly about reviewing and repealing those laws in the spirit of getting Brexit done. He encouraged people to think he was all about leaving the EU. He still claims to be in favour of Brexit, by the way. But Badenoch came clattering on stage from the wings last week, presumably shoved on by Sunak, maybe standing on a box to do so, to break the news, surprise, surprise, that another of yesterday's promises was today's betrayal. Most of those laws will remain. I'll be honest and say I had to look up Kemi Badenoch's job title again. She's business secretary, apparently. My recognising her while simultaneously not knowing exactly what she's supposed to be doing is just a symptom of how I no longer bother committing to memory what any of these jokers claim to be doing on our behalf. To me, the various holders of this or that government portfolio are just assorted heads, arms and legs sticking out of an amorphous blob that slides around in my peripheral vision, leaving a trail of lies in its slippery wake. The giant slug of state. A straightforward person would reasonably say promising something and then breaking the promise was tantamount to lying in the first place, especially when promising and then breaking the promise becomes an unmistakable pattern of behaviour. When the so-called vaccines were rolled out, the entire effort to get it into every arm in this country and around the world was predicated on the claim that taking the jab wasn't about the individual protecting him or herself from COVID. Rather, it was about making sure none of us would pass COVID on to anyone else. I didn't take the jab, and like the rest of the unjabbed, I was told I was a murderous monster. Only very recently did it come to light from Pfizer, revealed under pressure, that at no point before the jabs were rolled out was the company even asked to test if the product would prevent transmission of COVID. I repeat, no such tests were requested, far less carried out. This means the whole PSYOPs nudge unit campaign to shame people into taking the jabs and forcing on their kids as well, in the spirit of protecting others, was a lie. The knowledge that we were lied to in this most despicable way is out there now, has been for months, and yet where are the mainstream media headlines driven by righteous anger? It's an old foundation of legal proceedings that he who remains silent is deemed to have granted his consent. If we don't demand this behaviour stops, it will keep happening. And so I ask again, Are we saying it's OK by us for government and parliament to lead us up the garden path, to lie to us? As well as being treated like gullible fools with the memory spans of goldfish, do we also accept that a government can do what it likes without even bothering to consult with us, the tax-paying electorate? I, for one, do not remember saying it was OK for government to lead us up that garden path, to mislead us, to betray us, to lie to our faces. I don't remember giving them the go-ahead either, to just do whatever they want without so much as a by our leave. Do you? I used to wonder why David Cameron allowed himself to be the front man for letting the Brexit referendum happen in the first place. No matter how confident his masters might have been about the result, why take the chance? Now it seems to me the vote never mattered. The decision by 52% of the electorate to leave the EU made for some theatrics in Parliament, but they're good at theatrics in Parliament. In the end, though, a vote to leave or a vote to stay had been of no matter whatever, because those play-acting parliamentarians never had any intention of letting the vote stop Britain continuing to submit in every meaningful way to the EU. But setting aside Brexit, as Parliament effectively did back in 2016, the bigger problem we face is the reality Parliament evidently no longer cares what the electorate thinks. To paraphrase US comedian George Carlin, it's a big club and we ain't in it. Our noses are just being rubbed in their contempt for us, presumably until our faces are as smooth as the backs of spoons. Their contempt for us is everywhere. Does anyone remember voting for Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister or Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor? No? That's because we didn't. Our thoughts on the matter didn't matter a damn. They decided all of that for themselves behind closed doors. Does anyone remember voting for the possibility of lockdowns in a so-called emergency? And likewise for mandates for so-called vaccines and compulsory mask wearing? Does anyone remember seeing a manifesto pledge making plain that Parliament could drive the economy off a cliff if it felt the need? Does anyone remember voting for the suicide note that is net zero, or to let the World Health Organization decide in future what a pandemic is? To let unelected, unaccountable non-entities living tax-free in Switzerland and protected by diplomatic immunity shut us in our homes here in Britain? To let them decide what information is the truth and what information is lies? Anyone? Does anyone remember voting for 15-minute ghettos, where by a sleight of hand one town and city after another is being throttled, free movement curtailed or banned outright? What about the end of cash and the advent of digital tokens that can be programmed to have a use-by date that enables algorithms to decide how, even if we may spend our own hard-earned money? Anyone remember the public information campaign to bring us all up to speed on that one? Then there's the war in Ukraine. We weren't told the pertinent historic background, the truth, when Russian forces crossed the border in February last year, and we're still mostly denied the truth today. Billions of our pounds have been spent there, and billions more will be spent yet. Nobody better attack Britain anytime soon, because I'm pretty sure just about all our ammo has been spent in Ukraine. The US backed a coup in Ukraine all the way back in 2014, fomenting and driving the ousting of a democratically elected regime and triggering an ugly civil war that claimed tens of thousands of lives. Now hundreds of thousands more Ukrainians are dead. Where is the truth? The US are at it again in Pakistan right now. The government of Pakistan, led by Imran Khan, was ousted by a coup backed by the United States and by our government here in Britain. Imran Khan is under arrest. When asked about Imran Khan's arrest, our Prime Minister said last week it was an internal matter for Pakistan. He said he supported, quote, peaceful democratic processes and adherence to the rule of law, end quote. Do we really? A coup in Ukraine, a coup in Pakistan. Is that what support for democratic processes looks like nowadays? Were we asked about going to war with Russia in all but name? Were we asked what we thought about regime change in Ukraine, or indeed in Russia itself? Were we asked whether or not we supported regime change in Pakistan? Are we to shrug our shoulders and accept that decisions like those are simply above our pay grade? Having done what they want so many times now without being held to account, our political class is like a dog that has learned it can bite without any threat of consequences. Our government, our parliament, is a bad dog. Now that I've realised what's going on now, I think more and more about how long behaviour like this has been the norm without my noticing, without my bothering to notice. Shame on me. In 1922, English philosopher G.K. Chesterton warned about the danger of overmighty governments and bureaucracies. He warned against capitalists and socialists, saying exponents of either ideology were intent only on controlling people. Over 100 years ago, he was able to write, quote, "Government has become ungovernable. That is, it cannot leave off governing. Law has become lawless. That is, it cannot see where laws should stop. The chief feature of our time is the meekness of the mob and the madness of the government," end quote. I think the dreadful truth is that the disregard for we the people has been the reality for longer than anyone alive might remember. There's been a long process that started with determination to keep us from seeing what was really going on. But that has evolved to the point where we are now. Those that purport to lead us know we can see the lies, and yet that matters not a jot. The mainstream media was always partisan, supporting this political party or that. By now, there's no meaningful difference between the parties, and the mainstream media, therefore, has only one message to push, the message of a state that is essentially a one-party state. Chesterton also wrote in his time that, quote, "Men are ruled by liars who refuse them news and by fools who cannot govern," end quote. If as much was true in the 1920s, it certainly feels true in the 2020s. The lies are getting bigger. Now they're concealing nothing less than the destruction of our way of life. The role of women is being systematically erased. We're being lied to about the climate. For the longest time, we've been told there are too many people alive on Earth. And now we're being marched to the brink of World War III, all based on lies. Here's the thing, spotting the lies after they've been told is not enough. Surely we've learned enough to predict the lies they'll tell us next. Let's start asking questions about those lies as yet untold before it really is too late. All of that's my opinion, of course, and you can disagree. Keep your tweets and emails coming through the show. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me as well at gbnews, and I'll try to get to your comments later. Well, joining me throughout tonight's programme is financial and business journalist Jasmine Birtles.
Hello.
Jasmine, what do you make of my latest rant?
Well, I agree with everything you've said, to be honest, but what I'm thinking as you're talking is, you know, those of us who like to describe ourselves as awake spend pretty much all our time when we're chatting about this complaining.
Yes.
Which this is bad, that's terrible, that's appalling. Good grief, have you seen the latest? What we're not doing, and we desperately need to start doing, is coming up with solutions. And so this I think, honestly, I think the reason we're not, and I add myself in there, is because it's really hard.
What can we realistically do beyond the way society is structured, the way protest is managed by the minute, the way people are cancelled and silenced, and ways are found to silence people no matter what they say? What can we do?
Well, what I've noticed is that if we just refuse, if we become refuseniks, then it's quite surprising that you actually don't need that many people to refuse to comply before those in power who are, let's be honest, basically the same as us. They've just been, you know, put somewhere else, and probably I think they're more hypnotised than the rest of us, in all honesty. They suddenly find that they can't do what they thought they could. And we've seen this, you know, certainly in the last 3 years. You know, there have been a number of people who've said, no, I'm not going to wear the mask, no. And there are more and more people who are saying, well, if you don't take my cash, I won't shop here. And I've heard of shops, you know, turning around.
Perhaps that is true. I mean, I too, when people ask me directly in the street and whatever, what can be done, I say a turning away. You know, turning our backs.
Yes.
Those of us who don't agree.
Yes.
You know, we have been made powerless by a process. However, you can always withhold your consent.
Exactly. You can withhold your consent. But then what we need to do is create, I think, new structures. So we complain, understandably, about government, and I totally agree. I mean, goodness knows what I'm going to vote for in the next election. You know, I think probably about 70% of the country, honestly, I am politically homeless. I can't see a single party that I feel I can really get behind. I'm expecting.
Would you contemplate turning away from the vote?
No, and that's the thing, because I believe in structure, and I think that we need to change the structures. Women have died so that I could have the vote, so I always vote. And I think that, you know, I might have to spoil my vote. I will probably vote for an independent. That's probably what I'm going to do. But what I would like to see is more independence, and I would like to see more of us taking a really more interest in government in a way that actually we have begun to do in the last 3 years. And change that structure. I think we need more democracy. I mean, I laugh as I'm saying this because, you know, what we've seen as democracy has not, frankly, been democracy. We need more, we need stronger and more moral structures where you have, for example, you have more rotation in office, so that there's less likelihood of one or more ideologies taking over. We need honestly, we need more morality. And I'm a churchgoer, so I would say this, but I think that we need what the real nugget of most religions show, which is that reality, actual reality, is based on principle, it's based on truth, it's based on goodness, it's based on love. And the more that we can align our thinking and behaviour to that, the clearer.
For a politician of principle. I can
Yes.
think of one or two.
I can,
yes. Think of one or two. In fact, I can definitely think of one.
Yeah.
Coming up, I'll be speaking to Stephen J. Shaw, the writer and director of the documentary Birth Gap, Childless World, to discover why he believes we're sleepwalking into a population crisis. Don't go away.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. You've been in touch with feedback already. Rafe says, some really good points, Neil, but you lost me on the issue of climate and 15-minute cities. I want a better, cleaner future for my kids. I don't think it's a climate emergency, but I also don't think dirtier air and filthier seas is a lie, as you put it. Sue says, I would have to agree with you on the point that there are so many constant U-turns in our government's promises and policy. It's almost as if we've accepted it. It's no longer a surprise. John says, while I do agree that we're being led up the garden path on many things these days, Neil, I believe our politicians did genuinely believe it was an emergency at the start of the pandemic and genuinely wanted to protect the British public however they could. There we go. OK, for years now we've been bombarded with the idea there are too many people alive on the planet, that the survival of our species depends on significantly cutting our numbers in some way at some point, probably beginning right now. There is, however, another school of thought. Among others, Elon Musk of Tesla, SpaceX and Twitter fame has said the greatest challenge facing our species is not overpopulation, but total worldwide population collapse. As part of the necessary conversation, filmmaker Stephen Shaw has made Birth Gap, Childless World, in which he invites us to contemplate that most of the world's countries face a future in which care homes are full beyond capacity with the elderly, while the playgrounds and primary schools are all but empty of children. Take a look at a clip from the film.
Coming from the world of data science, I felt I understood populations are going up and that that's a problem. When I saw what was actually happening, I couldn't sleep.
I think that the biggest problem the world will face in 20 years is population collapse. Collapse. I agree.
This 4-year project took me to 24 countries, and over 230 people were kind enough to give me an hour of their lives. How could it be that suddenly countries are having so few children? I needed to go and find out.
And Stephen joins me now. Stephen, I watched the first hour of the film. That's what I had time for when I was doing some background research, and I found it utterly harrowing, jaw-droppingly upsetting. In a nutshell, what do you think is happening to world population?
Well, if you look at the world today, 70% of people live in a country where they're having less than 2 children per mother, below what we call replacement level. It means that whilst our attention might go to places like Africa that are having more children, the reality for most of us is we've got a very different future ahead of us. And why we're not talking about it is the reason I made the documentary. It's quite shocking when you look at numbers like Japan, Germany, Italy, that really, as you say, lead to harrowing stories about people's lives.
I watched, and so much of what I found so upsetting was one person after another, mostly women, shrugging their shoulders almost at how this childlessness had happened to them, and people speaking on behalf of society in full knowledge that fertility or population numbers were collapsing around them, and it was just a don't know.
Well, I find that a lot with younger people in particular. I call this unplanned childlessness. 80% of people in most of these countries have ended up childless despite originally planning to have a family, and most of us don't know that. And many of these women, men too, are suffering deep personal grief as to how, and I know people listening to this tonight will relate to this, and it is a harrowing story. For those people, of course, who don't want children, that's fine. I'm supporting people who don't want. But what we've got is people, I think, who drift into this. And whether that's societal or personal, that's part of the conversation I want people to be having, you know.
Where in the system, where in the process is the childlessness coming in? You know, I mean, I've got 3 kids. My brother-in-law's got 3 kids. You know, there's a lot of people around me, and I see them having families. So, where is this bubble of nothingness coming? Where is it?
Well, I think society today is engineered for people to have children in their 30s, not in their 20s. But yet, one of the data points I found is that for those people, those women who do not have their first child by age 30, there's only a 50% likelihood they will ever become a mother. And most people find that quite shocking. When I asked people through a survey, what age do you think it becomes 50-50, the most common answer was 40. So there's a misconception, really, in terms of both the shortening of the fertility window, but there's something else. The biggest single reason is not having a partner at that right time. You know, people think, OK, I'm 33, I'm 35, I'm ready. But they don't have a boyfriend, girlfriend, or they've gone through a divorce, and people don't factor this in. So there are so many people, and the rest of the documentary goes into this in quite a lot of detail, emotional detail, of people who are saying, where's my Prince Charming?
Jasmine, how do you react to this?
Well, you've mentioned Japan, Germany, Italy, and I did know about Japan particularly having this population crisis essentially, and also Italy. But these are very different countries,
yes.
and particularly Italy is a surprising one. It's a Catholic country. You expect Catholic countries
yes.
to produce more children. Did you get any reasons? Were they the same reasons or very different reasons?
Well, this is the most remarkable thing, and what drew me to this initial analysis I did was to find out what the connection was between these different countries. And it turns out in 1974, the year of the oil shock, both Japan and Italy at the exact same time had this sudden increase in childlessness. Yet family structure didn't change at all. Mothers who are having 1, 2, 3, 4, the percentage of those actually hasn't changed for decades. Childlessness rocketed around times of financial uncertainty. Yeah. And I think what happened, or what does happen, because it happened at the time of the mortgage crisis as well in the States and elsewhere, 07, 08, people delay parenthood. And probably for good reasons, there's uncertainty. But then we enter this window where, you know, fertility falls off much more quickly than we think.
But there have always been bad times for societies.
Yes.
And yet this would appear to be unprecedented, and
Yes.
it's global.
Yes.
So we've always hit crashes and hard times, 1929 stock market crash and all the rest of it.
Yes.
What's so different globally that's driving a global collapse?
Well, it's a great question. I think societal norms have changed in a way that they couldn't or didn't change in the past. And I think the idea that we can continue working. I mean, people study hard these days. That's a good thing. Women's education, that's a good thing. But then you need to develop your career. And that wasn't the case necessarily, a generation or two ago. So you need to invest time in doing that. Yeah. And then you're 32.
Is there a way back? I mean, there's a sense in the programme that we may have crossed the point of, gone beyond the point of no return.
Well, in a sense we have. We'll never go back. And the UK too, by the way. We have a 20% birth gap in the UK. If you take the number of people aged 50 compared to the number of newborns, this country is on a downward trend that we haven't actually noticed yet. Is there hope? There is. The hope comes from when I've shown the documentary to younger people. When I see, and I just had this at Cambridge this weekend, Cambridge University cancelled my documentary because some people think this is a dangerous subject. Yes.
Well, it is a dangerous subject.
Well, it was quite shocking to me.
It's an existential challenge.
Yes, but some people felt other students shouldn't listen to this. But those who came to me to talk about it, their eyes are opened and saying, well, actually, we didn't know this. And I think younger people will help societies change to make it easier, whatever that means, to start a family younger. But that's the only solution here.
Interesting.
Stephen, it's a fascinating topic. I'm going to be continuing it with someone who takes a rather different point of view on the state of the world's population, but a brilliant film. I'll be watching the rest of it with bated breath in my hand and my heart, but thank you so much for bringing it to us so far.
Thank you.
As I say, more on the birth debate to come, however, from the other side of the coin, obviously. Polar explorer and patron of Population Matters, Adrian Hayes, says we need not fear, and we'll hear his take in a few minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back once more to Neil Oliver Live. Now, we've just heard about the threat of population collapse. I'm joined now by Adrian Hayes, patron of Population Matters, that continues to fear the problem for the future is not too few people, but far too many. Population Matters is campaigning to achieve what it describes as a sustainable human population, encouraging smaller families and urging us to live within what they see as our planet's limits. Adrian, thank you for joining me.
Good evening, Neil. Good evening to all your viewers as well.
Thank you. We've just heard from Stephen Shaw and we've shown clips of his film. He's spoken to people all over the world warning of imminent population collapse. Elon Musk and others say the same. Why do you think we need even fewer babies in the world?
OK, well, I have great respect for Elon Musk's commitment to free speech, for starters, and I've watched Stephen's documentary. I think on the sides of trying to understand where this issue of falling population rates has come, it's very good. However, I think not for the first time, there is a little bit of Project Fear going on. There is no danger at all of population collapse within this century, and I will tell you why. Because what the three things Stephen misses is, yes, total fertility rates, TFRs, are falling down to about 2.3 now, but the population growth rate remains at 1%. Now, as long as we have 8 billion people, that means, in effect, 80 million extra mouths to feed every single year. A population the size of Germany. And I want people viewing to take that in stock. A population the size of Germany is added to the world's population every year. Right now, we're about every 11 or 12 years, there's an extra billion people on the Earth. It's, the first took thousands of years to reach the first billion, the 1850s or so, the second billion, the 1927, and it's really increased every decade since then. So we're now to 8 billion. And all projections, whatever projections you look, and I'm very suspicious of modelling on various issues, Neil, as you're probably aware, but I think the UN's got it pretty right. And, you've got a general medium rate projection increase of 9.7 billion people by 2050 and 10.4 billion people by 2100, by the end of the century. So I think where this idea that we're going to have schools with, I saw Stephen's documentary, with cobwebs on desks, simply isn't going to happen. It's going to take many, many years for population to decrease. And to be honest, we should celebrate this. We should celebrate reducing population, because population increase is the biggest single factor in environmental degradation on the Earth.
Now, I always cast myself as just the person in the middle. I'm listening. I'm listening to you saying what you're saying, and I'm listening to Stephen and watching his film. I'm listening to people like Elon Musk, who's obviously credited as being a bit of a polymath and with points of view to be taken seriously. How is someone like me to to decide and to discern which of these two very, very extreme views is correct. You're saying we've got far too many people and we always will have, and we're getting more all the time. They're saying the population is going to dangerously fall off the cliff in our lifetimes. How am I to know who's telling the truth or who's got it right?
Well, look at the facts. I mean, as I say, I'm coming from an environmentalist. By the way, not a climate change activist. I'm actually a net zero skeptic, but I look at the whole picture from a sustainability point of view, the three interlocking circles of economy, society, and environment. We've got to look at a big picture view of everything. And yes, obviously, as I said, from an environmental point of view, and just quickly touch this, it's the biggest single factor affecting our environmental degradation on the earth. However, to answer your question, why should we not be worried? Because what this shows is actually in industrial countries is women taking control of their bodies, of their careers, of their lives. And that, as I said, should be celebrated. Where Stephen doesn't touch, he concentrates solely on industrial countries. What he doesn't touch on is the countries of sub-Saharan Africa, of the Middle East. I'm also a patron of Chase Africa, who are the women of East Africa are crying out for contraceptive for family planning aid. He is not touching that documentary where we've got 4 to 5 children per head in many countries.
Would you dispute that throughout the film there's talk of, we need two surviving children per mother to sustain populations? And one of Stephen's central contentions is that 70% of countries around the world, some developed, some developing, are below 2, right down at 1.3 and 1.4, and that therefore they're not capable of producing the people who will have to earn the money to pay for all the elderly people who will gradually fill up the care homes and make that draw. Do you dispute that?
I do dispute that. Firstly, when you look at a compound rate, I mean, look at the UK alone, 10 million extra people in the last 2 decades. When you have that base level of growth, and as I said again, that 80 million people every year, the number of children being born, even though you're getting towards the replacement rate of two kids per woman, which is not, by UN projections, not going to be reached till the end of the century, you're still getting an extra huge number of children coming onto the earth. Number one. Your second point, Neil. An aging population. It is an issue. But it's been over-exaggerated. We have many, many decades to plan for this, and whether it's retirement longer, whether it's cutting the amount of money we spend on various waste, which I've got a big thing about on environmental issues anyway, and we just put it in to prepare for this, to pay for elderly people.
Adrian, this is a conversation I need to hear so much more about. I'll be honest with you, I find myself stuck in a cleft stick. I've listened to your contribution, I listened to Stephen's, and I find that I need to hear more about it, and hopefully we'll be able to do that at another time. But thank you for your contribution this evening. Jasmine, are you mollified and reassured by what Adrian had to say there after listening to Stephen?
Well, rather like you, I'm thinking, hold on a minute, which data is this? But I think what I'm getting the idea of is that it's an imbalance, that the reason why the population of the world is increasing is because people are generally living longer. So, the birth rate may be falling down that end, but at this end, we've got perhaps more and more. So it's probably this imbalance that we need to address, as well as women's and men's expectations.
Someone between the two has got it dreadfully wrong, and I think it is incumbent upon us as a species to work out where within those two extremes we find ourselves.
What are we going to do? Yes, what's the best thing to do?
Terrifying stuff, potentially. We've got another break upon us. Still to come, why a secret Roman wall discovered beneath the City of London has been given the highest possible heritage protection. You can't say we don't change the subject on this show. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, work from home is bankrupting Britain and Labour want to make it permanent. In the big story, is Philip Schofield's career about to end? We'll hear from a top TV insider. And my Mark Meets guest is Princess Diana's former psychic, Sally Morgan, who'll be making big predictions about King Charles, Rishi Sunak and the outcome of the next election. Plus my top pundits, tomorrow's papers and my satirical look back at the week in My Take at 10. We're live from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. Time moves so quickly on this show. And now for something completely different, as someone else used to say. Archaeologists have captured a previously unknown glimpse of Roman London. It seems that sometime in the 3rd century AD, a wall was built along the river when the city needed the protection of massive defences. Among much else, it suggests that by then the status of the city mattered to the Romans and they went to great lengths to underline the importance of the place and keep it safe. Joining me now to consider the latest understanding is Jane Siddell, Principal Inspector of Ancient Monuments at Historic England. Hello there.
Hi Neil, great to be with you this evening.
Thank you, great to see you too. Where exactly have these discoveries been made in mighty London?
We have 3 new sites which are really between London Bridge and the Tower of London. There is an existing piece of the Riverside Wall within the Tower of London, but 3 new sites turned up during office development along the riverside. And when they came up, the Riverside Wall was uncovered, and it's a very unusual structure, and that's why we thought, following the excavations by the Museum of London Archaeology team, led by the brilliant Sadie Watson, we thought we'd undertake further research and look to see just how unusual and how important the wall was, and that's when we decided to recommend it for protection. We put that to Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and they agreed that this was really unusual, and so they granted it protection, and they're now scheduled ancient monuments.
So exactly what has been found, for people catching those glimpses there of the footage we showed, and what's so unusual that captured attention?
What we've got is the remains of a riverside wall. It's probably about 1.5 kilometres long, going from Blackfriars down to the Tower of London. And the construction is in two parts. There's a masonry wall that sits on timber piles, and that's built of Kentish ragstone, Kentish hassock stone, and then Roman bricks. And then in front of that are the remains of actually a slightly earlier timber box quay, because the Roman wharf was this long structure, 1.5 kilometres long, where the boats would pull up to, and they'd offload people and they'd offload goods and then take on people and goods. And this was the heart of trading in the Roman Empire. So Roman London was not just a city, a domestic city, a place of temples, a place of forum, the basilica, but it was a trading centre, traded all across the empire with goods coming in, going out. And then for some reason, and this is why it is so weird, in the 3rd century, to use the technical term, a great big wall was built, we think maybe 4-5 metres high, and it cut off the wharf. It cut off the wharf from the city, and we've got unanswered questions that we still need to know about. We need to know how it worked, because you have to get through a wall, and this is the thing that not everyone understands about defensive walls. There have to be portals or gates through them. Now, we've got a landward wall in London that's 3 kilometres long, and that has a series of gates. So places like Bishopsgate, that's the Roman gate through the wall. Moorgate, that's the gate through the Roman wall. But how does the riverside one work? What's going on?
So does it mean that although they were well aware of the importance of the port and the necessity of trade, that a priority decision was made? Were they worried about some kind of riverborne, seaborne attack, that they said, right, we needed the port, but we're going to do without it for now?
This is what we think is happening. Now, the 3rd century, there's some turbulence going on in the empire. There have been plagues, there have been diseases, there have been unsettled times. And so we think potentially the wall was built because there was a preemptive need for defence. So I think that's it. There's no evidence at the time that there were attacks on London, but we think it may have been a preemptive strike to build the wall, because it's quite a big investment and it's quite a big undertaking to build such a large, substantial, long wall. So we think that's what's going on. There's economic uncertainty, there have been disease, there have been death, and so we think, yes, defence. The wharf obviously had to function because goods had to come into London, people had to come into London, people had to leave London. It was the centre of the administration for the province of Britannia, so people were moving regularly in and out of the city.
Jasmine, a glimpse of drama. Yes. You know, that there was something that people felt we've got to make a massive investment of time and effort here to protect from the possibility of and we don't know what.
I'm just wondering if it was a sort of customs and excise wall, you know, that if it was a place where those incoming had to stop, show their papers or, you know, Roman version, and just be checked over. You know, who knows? It's an extraordinary thing.
Is it all built upon now? Is it just sealed and buried, or will people be able to catch a glimpse of this again?
The 3 new stretches are all buried, and so you might ask, why did we bother protecting them? But the reason we bothered protecting them is that in 40 or 50 years' time, the new buildings will come down. And at that point, the legal protection will come into play. And this sounds like, you know, an awfully long way off. But as archaeologists, as you'll know, we're in this for the long haul. And just up the road at Vine Street in the City of London, an element of the landward wall has just gone on public show. Now, that was found. It was found in the early 80s.
Jane, I've run out of time here. I could obviously, with an archaeological background, I could keep talking to you. I love the continually unfolding story of London. Thank you, Jane Siddell, tonight. That's all for this week. Thanks to my guests, Stephen Shaw, Adrian Hayes and Jane Siddell, and my wonderful panellist, Jasmine Birtles. Next up, it's the Common Sense Crusade. See you next Saturday.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. As we move into Sunday, we'll see rain across the north and the west of the UK, Sunny spells holding on for much of England and Wales. We can see that on the bigger picture. This weather front slowly pushes its way southwards through Sunday and then across England and Wales into Monday, introducing fresher air from the north behind it. So towards the end of Saturday, it's generally fine and dry for much of the UK. Low cloud continues to slip back southwestwards across England and Wales. And here's that weather front across Northern Ireland, northwest Scotland, giving some outbreaks of rain during the early hours. Under any clear spells, temperatures will dip into single figures. Where we keep the cloud and the rain, it will remain in double figures to start on Sunday morning. So a wet picture across Northern Ireland, Scotland during the morning. England and Wales after a cloudy start, it should brighten up. We'll see some hazy spells of sunshine developing. We could see 1 or 2 showers get triggered in the afternoon in the warmth of that sunshine, highs reaching into the low 20s. Fresher behind this weather front as it turns drier for Northern Ireland, northwest Scotland